Why did you choose to include the geography of the magical world when, according to the Babylonians, why is that important to know those kind of things?
Well, first, it's to set the precedent or the foundation for the mythology, the religion, the mindset of the people, but also to show that there is no definite duality or good and evil, specifically in the whole Babylonian mind. The gods, for instance, let's start with the heaven of Anu, is the upper heavens, or the Empyrean, the highest point, the highest sky, aspect of the sky. And Anu represents, and is one of the most powerful gods, who is neither, he's both destructive and creative. He engenders many gods, he supports order in the universe, but he also, his children, two sets would be the 7 evil gods, and then Lamashtu, the demonic vampire model for Lilith. So the highest aspect of Anu is kind of like timeless being, and the spiritual aspect.
So it's kind of like what you strive to be, is a timeless being sort of thing.
Yeah, in a way, and it's really beyond. It's stepping outside of the concepts of good and evil that people cling to.
I mean, if you're always trying to go better yourself, never accept.
You want to ascend as a god.
How do you judge a barrier? How do you know that the heaven of Anu, whatever, is the highest? Could be beyond that. How does he know when to stop? How does anyone know when to stop?
It's a standard belief model in faith in the self. As you're ascending, accomplishing, growing more knowledgeable, you're going to continually reach heights that you didn't think were possible. And it's not going to be a day one thing. It's going to be a continual process that happens over time. That's what that symbolizes. It's not an end. It's not even it's kind of just a continual state of being.
Even in regards to your daemon, when you pick this envisioning of your future self, your ideal spiritual self, I think that's putting a definition on it. It's putting an ultimatum, like this is as far as you can imagine. I think that can't be fathomable. If it's fathomable, it's possible.
Whatever.
Are you saying that there's something finite about it?
In the realm of our mind, to an extent, yes. In that we decide at an early age and through experience what we're going to do with our life. This one life that we know that we have definitely because we're here and now. The concept of the daemon is the guiding instinctual higher self, right? And it's something that you perceive, and it will continually change over time. It will evolve as you evolve.
So my envisioning of my future self now will be completely different later, and I'll be able to think of things I never thought of before because of my past experience. I've learned more.
Yeah, it won't be completely different. What it will be is there are levels that you're going to see later that you would not see now because you haven't kind of like initiated to the next step. And that's something that's continual. I will continue doing what I do until the day I die physically. And that doesn't mean that my daemon has limits. I'm not setting limits on it. It's what I perceive and what I visualize. It's a goal, and it's a spiritual destiny or design that I'm choosing.
So you know your goal, and you're just going to follow it through no matter where it takes you.
Well, goals have to be adjusted based on where you are in life. When I essentially was doing my workings in the late 90s, it was centered around music, and I understood that I needed to communicate the ideas and what I do in writing. And I never expected it to go to where it is now. So there's an adjustment period, and it adjusts as you move forward.
I had a similar experience with like my writing. I wanted to initially be a writer, got a couple of things published through that, but in the end, it's really my view changed towards art, and that's what I've been doing with it.
Yeah.
But, either way, my widespan goal is just to do something creative that people remember me by. So either whether it turns out to be art or whether it turns out to be writing, I'm sure I'll achieve one of the goals as long as I go.
Yeah, it could be a fluctuation, kind of a fluctuation of both. I still, music is not what I'd call my true will. Now, when I was 16, I thought it was. But that was a stepping to lead me to my studies and what I do now. I didn't know that then. No one could really perceive that at that age. But it led me to the next step. And it's still something I enjoy doing when I can't express what I'm trying to do in a writing sense.
Right.
So the true will is not me writing a book per se. It's communicating, and this happens to be the model in which it's communicated.
Will can be bent but not broken.
Yes. The middle heavens. So it talks about the abode of the Anunnaki, which are sort of right under Anu. And like all mythologies, they set it up in a structure. And it's considered where the Anunnaki are gods of the underworld and of the middle heavens. And Marduk actually placed 300 of them there. I haven't really seen too many things that have all those names, but not really significant or important. They're spirits of the air, and Anu is the king over them. And also Marduk and Bel, which are interchangeable deities in Babylonia, were placed there also. Lower heavens, that's where the stars and the risen gods.
So, like, middle heavens would kind of be in regards to a modern application. It'd be like you're seeing results, successful. Like if you're writing, your stuff is selling, you're successful, whatnot. Lower heavens would be you at least know what you want to do and you're taking steps to get there.
Yeah, you could look at it that way, and also you could view it as this is comparable. Some of this is just comparisons to this mythology versus another one. The middle heavens could be compared to like Olympia, in Greece later on. It's not identical, but it's the abode of the kind of the risen gods. Lower heaven, it's the abode of stars and risen gods. Those are people or heroes, people that have achieved so much they gain immortality. That's where hero came from. It's like Heracles and all those different ones are considered gods because they did so many acts and they were built into mythology that they perceive them as ascending with the gods.
It becomes a folklore and a legacy, and things get exaggerated over time, and heroes become legends, legends become gods.
Yeah, and that's a very useful thing because it inspires people towards the best or what they consider excellence.
So you could say the same thing about yourself. If you do something immaculate, leave a good legacy, it'll turn into
definitely
people talking about you and you become a god through that.
It's like how, when Kenneth Grant died, who actually gave me a lot of advice and mentored me in a way when I started writing. When he passed away, I wasn't sad. What I did was offer incense and an invocation to Easa, which is his daemon, as a god. And that's kind of how like the Romans looked at emperors, when they passed away. So it's considered a very productive thing. Anton LaVey would be considered a god because of the things that he did to change the world as he impacted it. Whether you like LaVey's writings or not, it's still, he did change the occult community towards the better. And then we go into like the upper earth, the abode of humanity and all that. Not really significant in magic per se, other than just where many of the kind of reasonable and logical material aspects exist.
That'd be, if we were to relate this, interpret it like I'd done the before ones, it'd be like people who aren't applying themselves. This is the existence that they're at before they start to elevate themselves to something else.
An interesting thing about the upper earth, when humans were created, they were created, according to the Babylonians, to be slaves to the gods and to feed the gods with prayers, incense, libations. They made humans with the blood of Kingu, who is Tiamat's husband and kind of the leader of the chaos demons and monsters. Kingu was called the inventor of war, predatory instinct, the masculine aspect of Tiamat, if you will, the one doing it. Now, this shows that a lot of people have the potential, the predatory instinct inside, but they deny it, and they don't do as much, or very little, or they get comfortable with laziness. And thus their lives go very little, and they have patterns that don't work for them. So that is significant in that way. The underworld, chthonic, and I call it infernal, is really, it's where 600 Anunnaki or underworld gods are closed in. They dwell in the darkness. And Ereshkigal, Nerdal are the central deities, or the deific mass there.
I was going to ask you, so the underworld, do you consider Alpha and Omega as the same place? Do you think once we die, we're going back to the same place that once we began?
No, I think it's an energy change. There's a word for that that's in Luciferian witchcraft and a couple other writings. It's called Azathas, and it's a combination of two words, Alpha and Omega, utilized with as, or in Zoroastrian, the Utuk Deno, which is in Luciferian witchcraft, is the goddess associated with Lilith from a Persian or Manichaean standpoint. It's as is the devouring, predatory, fiery aspect that continually burns and wants more. It's a continued lust for existence and time, evolution. As a Luciferian, I have my own set spiritual beliefs through my experience, my eyes, if you will. And I always try not to reveal too many of the spiritual inside, like my opinions of life after death, simply because I don't want to shape anyone's interpretation rather than them just applying and seeing how they feel. Everyone's wired different.
I think it's also, if your life is only what you make it, then your afterlife is going to be based off of how you've lived.
Yes.
So everybody's is going to be subjective, so why waste your time trying to explain something that is going to be different to every person?
Yeah, it's meaningful to have a mythology. Mm-hmm. It is very meaningful to have a mythology, but to use it in a productive way, and not towards wondering what's so much after death. You've got to live now and build yourself.
See, that's the problems that I see with Christianity, is they're so concerned with their life after death that they don't think of their life now, when their life now will influence what happens after death.
Because when you're going to in the Christian mind, when you're going to a blissful place where you'll have eternal happiness, gold roads, and mansions, which, and as Christ, the time of Christ, I don't know if there were mansions as there are. So, I know it's written there, translated that way, but why would you want to do anything well here when you have that as a reward? And that's what people have to step outside of and understand, that by being your own God, you're not saying that you're better than anyone specifically, but you're going to be excellent within yourself.
I mean, even if there was a kingdom that was composed of streets paved in gold and all that stuff, you'd still be living a life of slavery, praising somebody other than yourself after that.
Exactly. The Yahweh, or the God jealous, is a completely predatory being that was invented by the loosely interpreted by the Canaanites, Ugaritic, and the Hebrew tribes that came out and took that area over, made that their central figure. But he was a kind of mirror of that tribe and their ideals.
You said that Luciferianism doesn't have a concept of a distinct good and evil. They're both the same thing, right? Then why did you decide to focus on the Maskim Hul or the evil spirit?
Well, I think it's in definition. In Maskim Hul, probably the most, what I've worked with the most and who the book is dedicated to are the 7 evil gods. When you hear or read evil spirit, what that means when you break it down in Babylonian mythology is evil is essentially a rebellion against the natural ordained chaos. So all of the gods, Anu, Marduk, they all have established what they call the ordained cosmos, working in order to serve their needs. That's Luciferian. However, the 7 evil gods they don't receive offerings because they're warlike and terrible by some. And they actually work with Nergal when he would go and destroy things. They loved it. Now, evil in that sense just means against the ordained cosmos. Now, as a Luciferian, when you start choosing your own path, you're moving into against the ordained cosmos, what society, what religion tells you you should do. And when you start going into knowledge that gives you tools, that is considered confrontational, the adversary is a motivational, inspiring force. It can be used destructive, it can be used in a creative way. Lamashtu is a perfect example. She's the sister of them. She's the first Lilith. She is called a singular goddess, and she's Anu's daughter. She's not a demon per se. She has all the attributes of a demon, except she's a goddess. She is called specifically a goddess. And she wanted to leave heaven, where she was removed from the highest abode with Anu, because she respected or asked to drink the blood of children. Now, would that be considered, wow, isn't that bad and destructive? Well, it's a symbol. Okay, the Lamashtu represents going against the ordained cosmos by the fact that the gods created humans to be servants. And the babies don't have a chance, really, to harm or to anger the gods. And if they serve them, why would they want to hurt them? They only punish those who don't do what they're supposed to for the gods, and they're perceived in the religions. Lamashtu says, well, no, since they're already servants, they're prey. That's the predatory instinct. Now, Lamashtu eventually, by her rebellion, by going against and doing her thing, they couldn't stop her. Anu could not stop her, no other gods could stand up to her. Just like the 7 evil ones. They represent change and the will moving forward, and the predatory instinct above all. Lamashtu eventually was placed into the natural role, attacking and using to explain why children die in childbirth.
You know, what's still kind of curious to me is Christians frown upon Satanists, Luciferian, whatever, because it's drawing the attention away from Christianity and it could prove them wrong. But why don't they feel the same against scientists who have claimed to have no spiritual background, but they're doing the same thing against Christianity was proving a lot of their beliefs false.
A lot of Christians, if you listen to especially the church leaders, and I'm not talking about the Pope, but other, like Baptist, the mainstream non-Catholic Christianity sections, despise and refute science to a certain extent, saying that still, in the face of reasonable proof, because it messes with their belief system, they say and tell people, well, that's not the answer. Maybe you're being deceived. You don't, you just have to have faith. That's what people fall back onto. And this whole system works in accordance with science, representing firstly the self and how we observe nature, because the gods are associated with elements of nature and ourselves.
I think we need to strive to model after science, because if you see, it's taken time. There are many people who are Christian who refute a lot of scientific claims, but at the same time they're slowly accepting it. And their alternative truth they try to provide, for like saying that the Earth is only 6,000 years old, whatnot. That just sounds about as ridiculous as whatever. But there's proof and evidence. But you can find that in Luciferianism, because you're judging yourself based off of results.
Yeah, that's where faith comes in. It's from the self. It has nothing to do with the Christian concept of faith, which is believe in what you've been told without question, because if you do question it, you're committing blasphemy, and God knows your thoughts, and you'll burn in hell. That's essentially the core of it. When it comes to like how Luciferianism works with science, look at Maskim Hul. The origins of man is the abyss, the sea, the dark waters from Tiamat. From that we crawled out, as I've said before, crawled out of the waters, and through evolution became who we are. The greatest sinners in all of the Hebrew biblical variants, the Book of Enoch, the adversary, the enemy of Yahweh, are the watchers. What do the watchers do? Look at their core. What is their foundation? What do they serve? They come down, beget children with the daughters of Cain, or human wives, and the union of the heavens and the earth beget giants, men of stature, greatness, who are so powerful that they start to drink blood symbolically and all this stuff. Now, in the Bible, there's a rare inscription or a part that says the soul, human soul, is in blood. And the blood represents as a symbol for life force, or the spirit. The giants are kind of a combination from Babylonia, because you had the offspring of Anu and Ki as the seven evil gods, Lamashtu. Then you have Greece. You have the giants, the Titans, the hero cults of Melkart and Heracles, Nergal, all those things. Now the Watchers taught humans, on top of that, how to evolve, how to become better, to make weapons, to defend yourself, feeding that predatory instinct that we have, exercising it, overmastering, creating order, peace through a warlike action, which is considered aggressive, but you achieve peace that way. They taught how to do makeup, how to know how to use plants for medicine, all of these things. So knowledge is hated by Christianity. Hated. It's the most vile thing to have knowledge. The original sin is from a woman, because they didn't like women. The original sin is from a serpent showing a woman an apple, or not an apple, but probably I think it relates to another fruit in that area of land that's not an apple, in Israel. it was this thing that brought you knowledge of good and evil and to be as a god. That right there is a wonderful thing. But the Bible has spun it and told people so long that it's evil and it's a sin. And people accept it. And that's why, when you come into concepts, it's only the Hebrew religion going into Christianity that has taken a snake, a serpent, a symbol of health, healing, wisdom, the underworld, to bigger things like in forms of dragons, because that's where that came from, conquering spirits. They took those and underworld symbols and just made them all bad. All serpents were bad because they represented old religion.
What would be interesting is if even the Christian Bible was, since everything is symbolic, if it was just misinterpreted, like, what if heaven, God, that was really supposed to mean being submissive and being a slave, whereas in Revelations, when the great dragon, or knowledge, came to flood the earth, then he took all of those who were submissive, followed him because he knew that he couldn't control. So that'd be an interesting take.
Well, the Old Testament is a collection of tales from the region and also as far as Babylonia and into Egypt. And Egypt, the law of Hammurabi, the Assyrian king, Babylonian king, that was the foundation for the Ten Commandments. The concept of the Ark of the Covenant is a war fetish, they found out. And because the etymology of the word is like a symbol to have to inspire people, and the Jews, when they were battling people. The tablets that they said they had were probably symbols too that represent our law as a people.
So you're saying that the Ark of the Covenant was basically like a standard?
Yeah, it inspired the soldiers. It was very close to like what a Roman eagle was. But the Old Testament writers use these things symbolically and as controlling tales to shape it to their, for instance, the War of Maccabees in the Bible says that Antiochus IV, without remorse and without reason, slaughtered tons of Jews just because they wouldn't worship him. Well, what they found through records and surviving inscriptions is a whole different story. And people have to look at the mindset of the day. First off, the Seleucid Empire was composed of numerous little satrap areas or regions, like districts. Mm-hmm. And you had to have a common central theme among them. Even though they did their own things individually, you had to have a common theme that kept them all together. If you started having some do something totally different, you would inspire rebellions in different parts.
See, that's why I think that it quite possibly could be just interpreted wrong, because there are so many cultures involved that what they meant, they had to kind of take it and warp it to a common good that would appease everybody in order to control everybody.
Yeah, and they sometimes, they took away all the gods from the Canaanites, which was, that's the area and the culture that they overtook when they came out of the wilderness or the tribes where they were before. And they were well knowledgeable of their gods, and many of those gods survived in different parts in that area. But the Jews said, oh, let's take Yahweh, which, that's jealous. They're one God. Mm-hmm. And there were different fractions of Jews or Hebrew priests. It was like a Senate or something, or like Democrats, Republicans. One of them wanted the one God, and people would not be practicing magic or divination because it would take away from the authority of their rule. They ruled by religion. Their economy was based, just as all in the Near East, on religion. People gave money to temples. People gave pricely golden statues to temples. Anyhow, the other Hebrews the other priesthood allowed magic. It was a part of their culture, necromancy. All those things that they turned into evil were normal practices. Now, one specific fraction won overall, and they imposed their will and made sure the writings reflected it. It's like history is written by victors. And that's how you see Christianity start to form. Same with the Romans. They said, oh, area of control. Much better than 20 different gods. Because it's not about the individual. It's about the controlling. Luciferianism is about the individual. That's why you have all these symbols.
Speaking of origins, I'm under the presumption that God is a symbol, the word God is a symbol for the beginning, and it's an unexplainable force, whatnot. Is Lucifer considered a god in that sense, that he started the need to acquire knowledge?
Well, let me first say that the idea of God from the etymology of the name in the ancient Near East represents a power associated with a specific action in nature. That could be the sun. That's a god. They would represent a storm god, a god of fertility and earth fertility, war, different things like that. Okay, then you had the demons, or the kind of spirits that didn't work in accordance with any one set thing. They did things for the gods, and they were well liked by the gods, even though they were very chaotic, and they did their own thing when they wanted to. They had more interaction with humans, according to mythology. Now, the Hebrew God, Yahweh, now I'm talking Christianity, okay? This is Christian lens. The Hebrew God would not he had a bunch of messengers, angels, which originally that's a Passover that's a resurgence from pre-Christian religion. These messengers were something else. They were now called angels. They served him. Lucifer in Christianity is, and especially later Christianity and through medieval times, was one who rebelled against God, did not want to bow, in Islam, did not want to bow before the clay of man, because he was composed of fire, which is superior, and was banished from heaven. Now, the reality of the origins of Lucifer is not specifically a god, per se. And let me define that, because that's important. There are many, many different gods who made the Christian Lucifer, who became Satan. Okay, there's, in the Canaanite religion, Ashtar, who represented Venus. He was a male form he was the morning star. He tried to take the throne of Baal, who was killed by Mot, or the death god, temporarily until he was resurrected. Anyway, Ashtar was thrown from his throne, cast down. The Hebrews took that myth, changed it a little bit to Halil ben Shakur, which is the son of light god. The morning star, if you look at astrology and the movement of the stars, Venus comes before the sun, first one you see, bright, and then the sun, which overpowers it, knocks it out of the way. And you see it go into night at the end of the day. The symbol there, right? Lucifer also was the Greek Hellenic, and these names, there was a Roman and Greek god pair called Eosphoros and Hesperos, which is the morning star and the evening star, the night bringer. That's Venus. Artemis, Diana, the goddess of the hunt, the twin of Apollo, is associated with Venus, as is Ishtar in Babylonia. All these different beings, including Apollo as he had an alternate name in the Near East called Helios, the god of the sun. He rode a chariot. He had the divine Malamu, or illumination. Those became the Christian Lucifer, as it's interpreted.
But couldn't an argument be made that if a god is used as a representative of an occurrence in nature, that's why there are many of them, like a storm god or
Specific power.
Or a war god, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't Lucifer be, since he is associated with a light bringer, the acquisition of knowledge, and looking to revolt against the shadow, couldn't he be the god of those traits, the acquisition of knowledge?
Absolutely.
It's just
now,
a symbol.
the reason I wanted to define that in that way was not to tear down the importance of the concept of Lucifer. Essentially through mythology, through misinterpretations and rightful interpretations of like Azazel and Shemyaza and all these different watchers, Samael included, the Archangel of Rome. That is Lucifer. When you put that together, that is a god in the sense that it is a deific mask representing a specific type of action or energy, which is bringing light, seeking your own knowledge, seeking your own path, and finding that light from within yourself. Lucifer didn't take light or the fire from anything else. He had it within him. He was the most splendid of angels if you read the various tales associated with it. So Lucifer is a convenient and useful and powerful symbol for this ideology and magical practice.
So what's to prevent? Right. So say Lucifer is composed of these other names, and other gods that predate. They could be composed of different names that occurred in like civilizations that without written record that we have no idea about.
Yeah.
So what's to stop us just making up a new god? Like, I'm going to take these traits that I favor, create this god, and...
We do that with our daemons, essentially. As you grow, as you go through initiation into the adversarial current or energy, you build a lot of inner power and knowledge, wisdom through experience. Your mythology will shape in your mind from the time you're a kid to all through your life. Those components of what you seek to be will become that god, which often will feed from and use other gods for further acquisitions of association, knowledge, power. So our daemon is that God that we seek to ascend as. It's our possibility and excellence.
So if you became everything close to your daemon, that you would be considered by other people and looked to for inspiration, such as gods of the past. I kind of think that the word God itself is dated. I think it's extinct, because even if you were to be looked to as inspiration, when would people publicly accept you as a god? Like, such as everyone can say that Zeus, he was a god, that sort of thing. When do you become publicly?
You know, the Greeks, and after the Greeks, Alexander the Great, had a custom in their people. Like, for instance, this man named Demetrius, the besieger, liberated Athens, Greece from they called it a tyrant or single leader. And he was proclaimed a god. And they made an inscription with a prayer, an invocation in sorts to him and his daemon, which is, they blended those, and it was known that you had one. And they wrote this wonderful invocation or hymn to him, and would offer incense and various things to Demetrius. And when people would do heroic acts that benefited and collectively benefited not only themselves, because they achieved power from it, but then they help others in the system of things. He was a liberator, so he was a god. And they invoked him, an interesting thing, they invoked him to help them when the other gods wouldn't. Now, Alexander the Great, through his actions, uniting the Greek world and the ancient Near East, and spreading, changing the world from that violent act that he did, is genocide, mass genocide. He also brought a lot of wonderful things. When his culture, because some of the Macedonians, they didn't believe in bowing before another or worshiping a person. They worshipped Heracles, but no one knows who that was that made that model. When that culture met the Persians, who did this thing, they bowed before the king and made offerings to his Fravarish, which is a daemon. The Greek customs, they blended. And then Alexander the Great was shown with horns, called a son of Zeus Ammon, part god. And his daemon was offered to. And it represented the best possibility. So that's when it becomes that. So like, when would an individual today become a god? When they impact enough people in the world, or in their world, whatever that means to them, and they achieve something great to themselves, and they have evolved, and they can describe, visualize, and name their daemon, then that daemon would become a god in itself. And after death, they may be viewed as a god. There's a difference. There's the person, then there is the daemon. Of course, they're intertwined, they're one, but there's a different aspect to each one.
So to become, like, say, the President of the United States, everybody might know who he is, but he'll never be accepted as a god because it's not multicultural, right? He, affected many people, but in order to become universal, I suppose, anybody without having a huge background could say any of the Greek gods or whatever, they could acknowledge them as a god from the past. But right now, even if you were just throw the word out, throw God out, just everything it stands for and represents, you could say somebody is like that. I don't know if you were inspired by Crowley or anything. He could have done a lot of good work and did things of that nature, godly nature, but I would consider him as God, and it'd be hard to convince the masses if he wasn't accepted in other cultures, countries.
Well, Christianity did a wonderful job of perverting and kind of destroying this concept of self-honor and honoring the best in your culture. Our country has this idea, if you talk to any regular person who doesn't have an occult knowledge, or maybe even a lot of pagans who are still within the good and evil concepts reacting to Christianity, if you say God, they say, oh, well, why don't you make the sky fall and raise the dead? Well, that is not the identity or the original concept of that, deifying someone. Deifying is, if you have an image of them, a statue, then that would represent a specific type of power that they represent, the excellence in which they inspire the person to. So you would just offer incense. You would never bow before it. You would never worship it. You would offer in terms of, this inspires me, I in turn offer this symbolically to you. And you gain something from it subconsciously. It's that connection. We have to change the way people perceive a God. Because it's not, the Christian perversion makes it a disdainful thing. They call them false idols.
I think you probably feel similar, but as far as creation and that sort of thing, whatever caused the Earth to be as it is still unexplainable, and as a scientist, I refuse to bother myself with it, because no matter how many gods or religious texts you read, you still can't be 100% certain. So that's why you don't concern yourself with the supernatural, like the afterlife. You don't think about how it's going to affect everyone else because it could change. They could have different thoughts, and you can't switch.
Yeah, I think it's irresponsible for especially a left-hand path Satanist, Luciferian, anything like that, to say this is the afterlife, this is definite, because it's subjective. You can't confirm that. Christianity is a death cult, and it's a mind-controlling one, and it's the worst of them. It's the worst plague ever, to strip man of his natural rights, his feelings, and his possibility in evolution. It slowed it down. Deities, gods, all represent powers that we put anthropomorphic or human or animal or beast-like attributions to. We put those masks around those powers and said, this is what it is. If you read Maskim Hul, this grimoire was put together in numerous parts as a cipher. And when I say cipher, it's a key towards initiation completely. And it's in different parts. One reads the grimoire first, they get one thing from it. They start something. You read it a couple years later. As it was developed, I started to see this. I didn't consciously do this until shaping it. Towards the end, it was already coming together that way. It brings you different levels of knowledge as you work with it.